Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with a warm-up story of petty revenge on the neighbors. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Steal my lawn chairs? I'm coming back for them. This happened in 2012 when my husband, then fiancé, and I were moving out of what was my first apartment, an old house from the 1940s. I lived there since 2007 with first my sister, then a roommate, then alone, and then with my husband. For 5 years, the neighbors below us loved to party late into the night. You could hear everything and smell every blunt/bowl they were smoking. We got along with them fine, save for a few instances that are too long to get into, but for the most part, there was no direct confrontation. At the end, my husband and I were putting a lot of stuff out onto the curb. Two of the neighbors downstairs saw us putting stuff out and asked if they could take it, and we said yes. They actually took quite a few items, which was great. What wasn't so great was coming back one day and realizing that our lawn chairs on the back porch were gone. You know the ones, those cheap white plastic lawn chairs that everyone probably owns at some point? Those, along with a bag of charcoal for our little piece of crap grill we had, were gone. I knew they'd taken them, and I was livid. Not because they'd taken them, but because it was the principle that if they just asked, I would have given them to them. Seriously, just ask. I ranted and raved to my husband the whole ride back to the new apartment about how if they'd only asked me, I would have given them to them. I had no problem parting with some cheap starter lawn chairs. I think I was planning on asking if they wanted them anyway, but they couldn't wait, they just took them. I seethed about it, but vowed for my petty revenge. Since they liked to stay up late every night until about 5 a.m. in the morning, I knew exactly when to stop by to see if the chairs were there. On my way to work at about 6:30 a.m. one morning, maybe 2 to 3 weeks later, knowing they'd be dead to the world, I stopped by the old apartment, checked the mailbox like I still lived there, and walked into the back. Sure enough, there were my 2 lawn chairs and the bag of charcoal. I left the charcoal but stacked both of the lawn chairs and loaded them onto my back seat. Driving away, I felt such a warm and fuzzy, smug satisfaction. And our second story. Let the professionals handle it. I work in a place that gives free legal advice to public. Just advice. We don't provide representation in court or draft any documents. Not in U.S. Today we have a client coming in to ask about divorce-related matters. Not going into details, but she acted in person and messed up her case, resulting in her case being extremely complicated and technical. It was also quite clear that she was not entirely truthful to us. Nonetheless, we decided to take up her case and give her some advice. The original approach was to ask her to apply for legal aid as she's unlikely to be able to understand the legal concepts and deal with the technicality of all the issues in her case. We will and did explain the issues regardless. The client looked confused and lost. We then proceeded to ask her to apply for legal aid. The client made various excuses to not apply for legal aid, saying it takes too long, the application is complicated, and they'll not take her case, etc. She then let it slip. Also, it's not entirely free, isn't it? I'll still have to bear part of the cost. This is true, but only partially and only if you win. The lawyer basically got fed up and said, look, you've acted in person, did all the paperwork yourself, and screwed up. It's a bloody mess. You're screwing yourself up further by not having any lawyers. You have no authorities, case law, rule, statute to persuade the court to rule in your favor. We do, because we know our stuff. We lawyers didn't spend years studying law for nothing. Let the professional handle it. There's no free lunch in this world. You can't go shop around asking for legal advice and thought people will teach you everything you need to know to handle your case. If you want to win this case, you must pay for the service, and with legal aid, it's a minimal sum. You can't win it all without wanting to lose a penny. After the lawyer had the soliloquy above, the client asked, okay, but how do I go from where I am right now again? The lawyer gave a very brief answer, wished her good luck, and walked out of the meeting. The client was confused and clearly didn't understand the answer, as we expected. She also appears to wish to continue to act in person. I'm pretty sure we'll hear from her again, begging us to resolve the even more complicated matter, which she'll proceed to further complicate herself after our meeting. I want to win, but I want to do so for $0, and you give me the info to win because you're supposed to give me advice toward my case. Seriously, TF. It's advice, not a whole defense. You nixed that already. And our last story. Crazy mother tried to take my friend's truck, stabbed him with a pocket knife when told no. Not my story. For starters, my friend owns a blue 05 Dodge Ram 1500. It's not the most reliable model of truck, but he's kept it in damn good shape and left it looking stock, save for some aftermarket alloy wheels. He tells me he was willed the truck from his grandfather when he passed away 7 years ago. Caleb isn't a mechanic, but learned how to do a lot of work on the truck himself. I even helped him redo the undercoating on it and buff polish the paint. The story takes place around 3 years ago. My friend tells me this was really the one and only time he's dealt with an entitled parent. He described her as looking like a teapot, short and stout, so from this point on, EM will be referred to as Teapot. For the sake of giving him a name, my friend in this story will be referred to as Caleb. Rewind 3 years, and our story begins at a local supermarket whose name rhymes with Stallmart. Caleb always goes out of his way to try and get as close of a parking space to the store as possible, and on this day he managed to do so. He went in and did the bulk of his food shopping for the next couple of weeks, and everything seemed fine, but of course now comes the enter Karen part of this story. Caleb was pushing his cart out when he saw an older woman trying to force open the rear door of the canopy on his truck, which is odd because you could clearly see inside that he didn't really have anything of value in it other than a few tools. She didn't seem to notice him until he was super close and said to her, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Teapot jumped back like lightning struck, but then quickly started playing the little old lady card. Though this woman was about 50, she put her hand over her heart and said in an over-exaggerated way, "Oh dear, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that, young man." "Yeah, sure, what are you doing?" "Oh, I was just trying to get in my truck. I locked my keys inside by mistake and can't get in." "Lady, that's not your truck." "Yes, it is. I just got it last year." "Oh, really? Then what model year is it?" "It's, 2010. Just look at how clean and new it looks." "No, lady, it's an 05. I know this because it's my truck." Caleb then produced the keys and pressed the button on the fob to unlock the door. He said Teapot first went white, then red with anger. It's pretty much full of stereotypical Karen after this. Teapot: "Listen here, you little crap. You didn't deserve a truck this nice. It'd be a lot better for someone like my son. He's a local college student, you know, and he needs a nice shiny vehicle like this to get around in." "Are you loopy, lady? My truck isn't for sale, and even if it was, how much would you give me for it?" Teapot started to look smug and pulled a checkbook from her purse. "I can give you $1,500 for it right now." Caleb facepalmed so hard he said he hurt his nose. "Lady, my truck's worth several times that, and I've personally kept up with its maintenance for several years. There's no way in hell I'd take $1,500 for it. Plus, there's no way I'd hand over the title unless I was paid with cash. I don't trust checks." Teapot moved to get up in his face, which was funny because he was a full foot taller than her. She was about to speak when Caleb silenced her with a loud, "Don't even think about it, lady. My truck isn't yours for the taking. It never will be. Now leave me alone so I can unload my groceries in peace and go home." He then did his best to try and ignore Teapot as she began screaming and saying she'd call the police. Caleb then just yelled back, "Call them then," and she actually did. She pulled out an old flip phone and began fake crying while speaking with the person on the other end. Caleb finished loading his groceries and locked the truck because he wasn't about to drive off with the police on their way. When the police arrived, Teapot actually flopped down on the ground and started fake crying like a baby while flailing her arms and legs around and pointing at Caleb screaming, "He knocked me to the ground and stole my truck. And then he said he'd come back later and hurt my family. Arrest him now." The two police officers that had showed up were an older man with a mustache and a younger one that Caleb said he guessed was a rookie because the younger cop was immediately getting ready to aim his taser when the older one stopped him so they could assess the situation first. Caleb raised both hands and calmly stated that nothing Teapot said was true and that she'd been harassing him since he caught her trying to break into his truck. Teapot, while still having a tantrum on the ground, yelling, "He's lying! Arrest him!" The rookie officer spoke with Teapot while the mustached one spoke with Caleb. Since he was so close to the store, Caleb stated that he bet the security cameras picked up the whole thing. It was at that point that Teapot gave up her act and started screaming like a banshee while running at Caleb with a small pocket knife she'd pulled from her purse. Caleb tried to back away and held his hands up, and the knife went right through his left palm, which he described to me as one of the most painful things he'd ever felt. She pulled the knife out and tried to stab him again when the rookie tackled her to the ground and tased her. Teapot flailed around and started screaming and sobbing like a baby. When she finally stopped moving, the mustached officer cuffed her while the rookie called for an ambulance. Teapot was loaded into the police cruiser, kicking and screaming, "Help! Police brutality! Someone help me!" Caleb was taken to the hospital to tend to the stab wound in his hand. Turns out he was incredibly lucky as the knife had gone right between the bones and not damaged any tendons. Later in court, Teapot actually tried to plead not guilty, but the evidence against her was overwhelming and she was charged with attempted murder, attempted grand theft auto, and a few other things. The judge sentenced her to be put in a mental facility because she clearly was not well. As soon as that happened, Teapot flipped out and began trying to charge at the judge, but she was quickly grabbed by the guards and hauled out of the courtroom. Also during the trial, Caleb met Teapot's son. Turns out he'd gone no contact with her as soon as he was old enough to move out because she was the most controlling and overbearing mother you could imagine. And ever since she'd been trying to show up at his apartment and bring him nice things he suspected she'd stolen just to try to get him to talk to her. Guess she figured Caleb's truck would have gotten her back in her son's good graces or something. This story's getting written now because Caleb decided to check up on Teapot by searching her name online. She's still in the mental facility and found out from her son through social media that she looks to likely be staying there for quite some time to come. New episode on Karen's attack. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.